Welcome, everyone. My name is Donna Thorson, and I'm a Senior Project Manager from HealthInsight. I'd like to welcome you to our half-hour Hot Topics in Infection Prevention series. These webinars are designed to provide you great ideas on infection prevention strategies in a 30-minute time frame to accommodate your busy schedules. A few housekeeping details before we actually get started. We want you to please let us know who is on the call today by entering your name, the role you hold at the facility, and the facility that you work at. If there's anyone listening in as a group, please type in the names of the people joining you as well so that we have a full head count of who's participating. Your phone or your microphones and cameras are muted. So if you would like to ask a question, please enter it into the chat and we will facilitate a question and answer session at the end of the presentation if time permits. You are also welcome to reach out directly to our speaker with questions following today's presentation. He has given us permission to invite you to do that. We are excited to introduce our speaker today. He will be speaking about Legionella, the importance of nursing home compliance with the American Society of Heating, Refrigerating, and Air Conditioning Engineers, 188. His name is Russell Nassof. He's been involved in the field of environmental and health risk consulting for over 25 years, concentrating his work in the areas of industrial hygiene, microbial contamination, insurance defense, infection prevention, and liability minimization for vascular access issues. Many of his risk management programs have been adopted as underwriting standards by the insurance industry worldwide and are utilized as risk barometers from which to evaluate emerging healthcare and environmental risks. In the area of infection prevention and control, Mr. Nassof developed a unique, multifaceted infection control program designed to reduce infection rates and provide legally defensible documentation to the healthcare provider as well as the insurance industry. Russell has been involved as a consulting testifying expert on cases involving fungal contamination, norovirus, Legionella, and nanotechnology. He began his career as an attorney for an international insurance carrier in New York and later formed his own consulting firm, which has been involved in events such as the supervision of the restoration of New Orleans hospitals following Hurricane Katrina, the compounding pharmacy fungal meningitis outbreak, the Veterans Administration outbreak of Legionnaire's disease, and the recent Ebola outbreak in West Africa. His firm was also involved in the Legionella water testing in Flint, Michigan, under the auspices of the state of Michigan and the CDC. He has presented hundreds of seminars and webinars to legal, insurance, loss control, healthcare, and risk management groups throughout the United States, Canada, Europe, and Asia. He has co-authored books on fungal contamination, published numerous white papers and articles, and holds a patent on a fungal sensing device. Russell received his Juris Doctorate and undergraduate degrees from Emory University in Atlanta, and we are very happy to have him with us today. Before I turn it over to Russell, would you mind saying hi to the group so we can make sure they can hear you all right?
Yes, thank you, Donna. Hello, everybody. Good morning or good afternoon, depending upon where you might be. Hopefully the sound is good.
Sound is good. Thank you very much. I will now turn things over to Russell.
Okay, and if you could advance the slide, Donna, that would be great. So I began talking about the issue of waterborne pathogens years ago, and at that time, not too many people were interested. But within the last few years, however, with the implementation of ASHRAE 188 and with CMS now requiring most healthcare and skilled nursing facilities to have water management programs in place, waterborne pathogen contamination has become a very well-known issue. And along with particulate air contamination is getting quite a bit of new attention, particularly in healthcare facilities. Next slide. Our objective in this short presentation, and there's going to be a lot of information, is going to be to identify the factors necessary for transmission of waterborne pathogens. We're going to specifically focus on Legionella today, and understand the genesis of this issue and the reason for its increasing prevalence. We're also going to look at the risk factors for Legionella growth and delineate the content and impact of ASHRAE 188 on skilled nursing facilities. And lastly, we're going to define the steps needed to comply with ASHRAE 188 and why compliance is of critical importance. This is scheduled to be the first of several webinars on this topic because there's too much information to be covered in just a short 30 minutes. Next slide. So as I said, we're going to go through the background, the risk factors, and then like every attorney, I'm going to go through a little bit of risk mitigation. Next slide. So a lot has changed since 1976 and the first reported outbreak of Legionnaire's disease in Philadelphia. That year, the American Legion was holding their national convention in Philadelphia at the then famous Bellevue Stratford Hotel when a pneumonia-like illness killed 34 attendees and sickened hundreds more. Later that year, the source was identified as a bacteria in the building water system, actually in the cooling tower of the hotel, which was subsequently named Legionella pneumophila. Legionella for the Legionnaires who were at the convention, and pneumophila, the Latin term meaning a lung-loving bacteria. It's very interesting, however, that more recent studies indicate that Legionella bacteria can actually travel on what we call drift or mist from cooling towers up to 6 kilometers from the source. So the source in this case may actually have not been the Bellevue Stratford Hotel, but rather another hotel. And the aerosol drift may have been the actual culprit, since many of the Legionnaires would stand outside on the sidewalk at that time and smoke cigarettes. And as we'll later go into, cigarette smoking and Legionella is a very bad combination. The repercussions for this is that this grand dame of hotels, the Bellevue Stratford, that had been in Philadelphia for years, was subsequently closed. There was a lot of litigation and a lot of fallout from this outbreak. If we jump ahead 40 years, what we're seeing now is more and more issues related to Legionella, Legionnaire's disease, and outbreaks. And it's been very costly in terms of dollars worldwide. You can see above, we've had outbreaks in Europe, 32,000 cases between 1995 and 2005. One of the largest being a hospital in Murcia, Spain, with over 800 cases, a flower show in the Netherlands with over 300 cases. Virtually every state in the United States has had an outbreak. We've had outbreaks at hotels like the Chicago Marriott with 23 dead. We had outbreaks in New York City last year, which ultimately led to new regulations being put in place. Here in Las Vegas, where Donna and I sit, I was very involved with an outbreak at the ARIA Hotel with 18,000 notifications that had to go out. There was an outbreak at Grady Memorial Hospital, which cost them almost $1 million. Very famous outbreak recently at the VA in Pittsburgh, and many others. Next slide. So it's clear that Legionellosis cases are increasing, although it's not really clear why. There are a variety of factors potentially causing this, including potential climate change, deteriorating an older infrastructure, increased use of green technology, which requires us to lower water temperatures to levels that are more conducive for Legionella growth. There's also certainly an improved public awareness. Laboratories are actually looking for this. Healthcare facilities are actually looking for this now, as it often masquerades as pneumonia. Plus, we have an aging population, which probably makes us more susceptible. Studies have shown that the vast majority of buildings in this country are actually colonized with Legionella. And as we know, colonization doesn't necessarily mean we have disease. However, it is present. And the problem is that there's no definitive data as to what constitutes an acceptable level of Legionella in our water systems. And any detectable level of the appropriate pathogenic species of Legionella can be problematic if we've got an appropriately susceptible patient or claimant. And therefore, it's super important to examine the conditions that support growth and development of Legionella in water systems, and why the ASHRAE 188 standard is not directed at testing, but rather controlling the conditions which result in Legionella growth. Next slide. So just by way of background, we've got some broad definitions. Legionellosis is kind of a broad definition that applies to any illness caused by exposure to Legionella bacteria. It includes both Legionnaire's disease as well as the less serious and self-limiting Pontiac fever. Then we've got the Legionnaire's disease itself, which is a significant bacterial infection of the respiratory tract, often with accompanying pneumonia. Legionella is primarily an aquatic bacteria, although it can be found in bodies, in some soils as well. There are many species, actually over 50 species of Legionella, of which Legionella pneumophila, and specifically serogroup 1, accounts for the vast majority, actually over 90% of the disease that's caused. So most species of Legionella are actually not problematic. And this makes it particularly difficult when defining the risk for the disease, because we've actually got to speciate to find out whether we actually have pneumophila and not some other less problematic species. Next slide. The symptoms of exposure are basically flu-like: early aches, fever, loss of appetite, and later we've got more pneumonia-like symptoms. With respect to epidemiology, we've got a long incubation period, relatively, of 2 to 14 days. And this long incubation period makes source identification particularly difficult many times, because when we're looking for a source, then we've got to go back and trace the patient back 14 days to see where potential exposures may have been. It's extremely rare to contract Legionnaire's disease more than once. It's a seasonal type of issue, with most outbreaks happening in the late summer and early fall. The reason for that is usually this happens after a buildup of running air conditioning systems all summer long, where they get filled with all this gunk and bacteria that actually makes it more conducive for there to be a potential exposure. Most cases have occurred in the Northeast United States. Again, the prevalence of probably more cooling towers and older buildings, and most of those impacted have been middle-aged men. Next slide. Greatest risk is our typical kind of list of culprits, immune-compromised, end-stage renal disease. For skilled nursing, it's particularly important to note that the elderly, and here they call the elderly older than 50, I kind of take objection to that, but the elderly are clearly more susceptible, as are tobacco smokers. Less than 5% of Legionnaire's disease occurs in healthy non-smokers, and it's very rare in children. What happens, the method of transmission actually occurs when you have any action that interrupts the water flow into droplets of about 1 to 5 microns in size. And when this happens, you've got potential dissemination of Legionella, which can eventually wind up in the respiratory system, which is why individuals such as smokers with impaired cilia are therefore at increased risk for exposure, and why those smoking Legionnaires at the initial outbreak were the ones who were most often impacted. Droplets greater than 5 microns usually go into the stomach without causing harm, which is why enclosed water systems, which don't generate any waterborne aerosols, generally pose a lot lower risk. Next slide. Inhalation and aspiration are the main methods of transmission, and therefore transmission sources which generate these aerosols are very important with respect to how Legionnaire's disease is transmitted. So it's got to be inhaled or aspirated, and again, water dispersion, that kind of breaking down of these particles into 5 microns or less, is the very important consideration with respect to Legionella impacts. Some of the weirder sources that we've run into, actually those vegetable misters in grocery stores, when you reach for the carrots and you get sprayed by water, they've been sources. Car washes have been sources. If you stand kind of downwind from the car wash and you get a spray, those have also been sources of Legionella. Next slide. Basically, anything with a residential component has a higher risk. So we see our greatest risk in healthcare, hospitality, senior living, and schools and universities. Largest settlement legally was over almost $200 million, actually against a cruise line for 16 passengers who allegedly got sick from a faulty hot tub. Next slide. And obviously there can be a lot of repercussions. So there can be bodily injury complaints, property damage, certainly negative publicity, which can destroy a facility, relocation costs, remediation, legal costs, potential business interruption, and also consequences under the Affordable Care Act, especially with respect to reporting of infections and patient satisfaction and value-based purchasing. Next slide. So probably the most important slide in this short presentation is, what do we need to have a problem? Basically, we need four things. We need the level of contamination in the water source to be sufficient to transmit disease. We need to have the appropriate species of Legionella in the water. Remember, I mentioned we've got over 50, most of them not problematic. We've got to have a high-risk or susceptible individual, one of those high-risk groups that I mentioned earlier. And lastly, we've got to have the right intensity of dissemination of the exposure that breaks down the water molecules into less than 5 microns. Next slide. So now we're going to look at some of the risk factors that actually contribute to growth of the bacteria in your water systems. First one being temperature. Like most bacteria, Legionella likes to thrive in nice warm temperature. Above 140 degrees, it's basically killed. And so it's very important to keep your hot water as hot as possible. Now, for nursing home and skilled nursing facilities, this really presents an interesting dilemma because we've got a scalding risk, especially in long-term care and skilled nursing facilities. And there's a significant risk anytime you get the water level or water temperature up that high. And as a result, many jurisdictions have actually imposed anti-scalding regulations which limit maximum water temperatures, but have also contributed to the outbreaks of Legionnaire's disease. There's one that I know of in Miami Hospital in Ohio, where actually it was a new patient wing, and the building codes restricted water temperatures to the extent that they actually may have indirectly resulted in an outbreak of Legionella. In many of the outbreaks that we cover, we find some of the biggest problems being a failure to keep the hot water circulation loops hot enough, and also a lack of chlorination in the building water system. Next slide. Other factors that can contribute to Legionella growth include complex piping, things called dead legs, which are kind of piping that goes nowhere, so it allows the water to stagnate. We've got long runs of piping, oversized piping, again, causing stagnation and warmer temperatures. And most problematic is that most facilities really have no idea of what their water systems look like. And the actual configuration of the water systems is usually nowhere close to even what's shown on the as-built drawings, usually due to the fact that many facilities have had renovations, additions, upgrades, especially in healthcare. And that's why developing these water process flow diagrams, which are an integral part of a water management program, are often one of the biggest challenges for a facility. Next slide. Other things that contribute to growth of Legionella, we've got things like scale and sediment, sludge, rust, algae. We also have biofilms. And Legionella is going to thrive where biofilms grow. And we know that biofilms will grow well on things like porous materials like stone, plastic, and concrete. And then the rubbers, woods, plastic, and paper provide nutrients for the Legionella to grow. So if we want to get rid of the Legionella, we also have to get rid of the biofilm. Next slide. Legionella can be found in both potable or drinking water as well as non-potable water. And interestingly, Legionella is chlorine tolerant. So if your incoming municipal water quality actually has less than 0.5 parts per million of residual chlorine, Legionella will still grow. And what we find is that most Legionella actually comes in from the municipal water supply and can also be based upon having more sediment in your water systems. And therefore, many times we recommend an incoming filter of the municipal water supply to cut down on the sediment. Next slide. You can see on this slide that there are a wide variety of potential sources of Legionella dispersion. Many of these are very common in skilled nursing facilities. Next slide. So what happened was we've had a variety of regulations and guidelines all the way back to the late 90s. Finally, ASHRAE came out a few years ago with 188. And the difference in this guideline or regulation as opposed to the others, is that it has been written in code-ready language, meaning that where it's adopted into the building codes, it actually has the force of law. So compliance with ASHRAE 188 is really the best defense that you can have to any allegations of negligence or potential Legionella claims. And it requires that all facilities, and that includes skilled nursing facilities, develop what we call a water management plan or a water management program. And shortly after ASHRAE 188 came out, CMS came out with a memo in 2017 and revised in 2018 requiring skilled nursing and long-term care facilities to have a water management program in place and to comply with ASHRAE 188. Next slide. So when you're thinking, hey, does ASHRAE 188 apply to my facility? The answer is probably yes, because you can see here that if you run an inpatient facility more than 24 hours overnight, healthcare facility, it applies to you. It certainly applies to senior housing, and that is anyone housing, any facility housing people over the age of 65. You can see other facilities that it applies to, but basically it definitely applies to senior housing. Next slide. It also applies if you've got whirlpools or spas on site, if you've got decorative fountains or misters or cooling towers, virtually any disseminator of potentially contaminated water particulates, ASHRAE 188 will apply to you. So what do we need to do? Well, the first step we need to do in the next slide is we need to establish a team. We need to designate a multidisciplinary team, and that usually includes people from a wide variety of backgrounds: maintenance, engineering, risk management, consultants, contractors. Basically, for skilled nursing, we also like to see an epidemiologist or a CIC on the team. Next slide. Once you have your team together, what you need to do is you need to find your as-built drawings, your drawings of your water systems, and compare those drawings with the current conditions and change them if necessary to make sure that your drawings actually reflect current conditions. So you want to develop facility-specific water system flow diagrams. Next slide. And essentially, very briefly, they're going to look like this, and they're going to track the water system all the way from the incoming municipal water until it exits in the sanitary sewer. Next slide. And then once you've got your drawing in place, you're going to want to indicate all the areas on this drawing where there could be potential issues that could contribute to the proliferation of Legionella due to things like temperature, improper temperatures, water stagnation, lack of disinfectants, and any other type of hazard. Next slide. And as I mentioned earlier, you're going to want to look at all of these exposure points, and that can include cooling towers, evaporative condensers, whirlpool spas, fountains, misting systems, and certainly you're going to want to look at things if you've got a cooling tower like drift, which is the evaporative water that comes off the cooling tower. We find all too often that many times organizations place picnic tables right under the cooling tower. People usually smoke at these picnic tables. So again, just like at the Bellevue Stratford, you're creating a perfect environment for Legionella to grow. Next slide. And obviously, skilled nursing, there's a lot of risk because you've got a higher probability of infection based upon the probability that you've got a lot of potential water-based processes that could be potential disseminators of infection, plus you've got vulnerable patients. And when we do a risk assessment for the typical skilled nursing facility, we obviously want to place the greatest risk in those areas that have the highest likelihood of problems. So we want to look at all clinical support areas, we want to look at all patient care areas, and we want to look at all water use endpoints. Next slide. So what do you need to do? Well, after you get your drawings together, you need to do a risk assessment, and you need to identify all those locations where water quality can be controlled. ASHRAE 188 does not require water testing. We're actually going to go over that in the next series that we're going to do, whether to test, why you should test, why you shouldn't test. But what you need to do under ASHRAE is you need to identify the locations where you can control the water quality and then set limits at those locations, and then you've got to monitor those limits. And if you exceed those limits, you've got to establish corrective actions that should be taken to control the limits. Then you've got to establish procedures to confirm that what you're doing is actually working or not working. And of course, being the good lawyer and being a good regulatory expert, you've got to be sure that you're documenting what you're doing. If you exceed your parameters, you've got to document what you did to correct the problem and also what the end result was. Next slide. And this is also should be reflected in your diagram. So this diagram is an amended water process flow diagram showing the issues of concern, let's say temperature, let's say lack of chemicals, what you did, and the resolution of those issues. Next slide. And that's not all that ASHRAE 188 requires. It requires also specifications for system startup and shutdown, so that if you're shutting off your water for any particular reason and you start up, there's a whole set of requirements that you need to do with respect to that. It establishes requirements for system maintenance, for water treatment, as well as emergency response. So what do we do if we've got a potential outbreak? And we get called all the time for questions. Hey, we've had a potential case of Legionnaire's disease. What do we need to do? How do we contain the problem? How do we interact with the regulatory authorities? And what do we do going forward? Here in Clark County, we have had an abundance of Legionella outbreak at many large hotels and casinos. And the first step we always want to do is to contain the impact. And we'll go into some of that in the next session. Next slide. So what is CMS looking for when they come and do an inspection at your facility? Because I imagine many of you, like most of our hospital clients, are very concerned about how to get in compliance for an upcoming CMS inspection. So they're going to look for, number one, do you have a team in place? And I can tell you one of the things that CMS has dinged healthcare facilities for is not only having a team in place, but you need to have a designated team leader. You've got to have a go-to person, and that person needs to be specifically identified and hopefully has got some background in water management issues. Then they're going to look at your drawings. Hey, do we have our water process flow diagrams, and are they up to date? And then they're going to be looking at the physical and chemical conditions in those water process flow diagrams to see where the hazardous conditions might occur and what control measures you've put in place to, in fact, mitigate any problems. And then they want to see that you've correlated your exposure points with your potential patient vulnerability. And they want to see that you've determined what your Legionellosis potential is from your risk analysis based upon where your greatest risk is and where your vulnerable patients are. And then, of course, we want to be sure that if, in fact, your limits have been exceeded, what did you do in that case? How did you respond? How did you document it? And that's, in fact, what CMS is going to be looking for. Next slide. So the implications of all of this are the following. In states that have adopted these guidelines into the building codes, New York being one of them, they're going to have the force of law. Now, I can tell you that New York did this last year after their outbreaks. Other states are going to be following suit. This is just the beginning. This will become law. Compliance is going to provide additional protection from any allegations of negligence you're going to get. So if you have a case of Legionnaire's disease, the first thing the plaintiff's attorney is going to ask you is, hey, are you in compliance with ASHRAE 188, and where's your water management program? This is the first thing CMS and any regulatory agencies are going to ask you as well, because compliance is going to be a valid defense, especially in cases where you can't really precisely identify how the patient got exposed, which is more cases than not. Because remember, I mentioned the incubation period is a very long period of time, and very often what we can do is try and identify other areas where the particular patient may have been exposed. So if you've got all of your T's crossed and your I's dotted, and you've got your water management program plan, you've got your water management plan in place, it's going to go a long way towards helping your defense. It's also going to establish benchmarks for the type of exposure and is going to limit any claims that can be filed. And I can assure you that if you don't have it, plaintiffs are going to use this as proof that you're negligent. If you have coverage for Legionnaire's disease, which insurance companies are often giving now, insurance companies are going to require that you've got a water management program in place as well in order to get coverage. Next slide. So as I mentioned, this was a quick 30-minute snapshot, a lot of information. We've got a lot more that we can cover on this topic. This was kind of just to get you all interested. Follow-up topics and subsequent webinars are going to go over things like water testing. I get that question asked all the time by facilities. Should we test? Why shouldn't we test? When should we test? Where should we test? How do we test? What do the results mean? What do we do if we have a problem? What is CMS going to require when they come to visit? How do we get insurance coverage? What's our potential liability? All of these are potential topics for additional 30-minute segments. As Donna mentioned in the beginning, I am happy to answer questions. I'm happy to help you. We've developed a lot of documentation and information that can be helpful for you, and I'm sure Donna will be more than happy to give you, my contact information. And again, I'm sorry that there probably is no time for questions, but as I said, there's a lot of information on this topic, and hopefully this whetted your appetite that you're going to want to become compliant and have a greater understanding for this topic. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Russ. And I apologize, I used the wrong slide set, so we don't have his contact information on this slide. But please feel free to reach out to me personally or to your state lead to get the information about how to contact Russ. He is more than happy to answer any of your questions. I did put into the chat box the link to the actual ASHRAE guideline 188. And this webinar was recorded, so it will be posted in a couple of weeks. And I see that we do have a question about, can we get a copy of these slides? Yes, we will definitely. If you would like to have a copy of these slides, reach out to your state lead. Julie, that would be me, so I will get them to you. But Russ is more than happy to share his slides and his knowledge with you. So do we have any questions? Lots of great information and great presentation. So Russ, they definitely were interested in what you were doing. I noticed there were a lot of people on here that were involved in maintenance. So hopefully they'll be able to move forward on your suggestions for how to get a team going and looking at their diagrams. Thank you so much, Russ, for your information today. And once again, everyone, keep your eye out for looking at further webinars in this series. We will be providing more on water safety management.
Thank you, Donna. Appreciate the invite.
All right. Have a wonderful day, everyone. And please reach out to your HealthInsight lead for any resources or information that you would like regarding this topic in particular. And have a wonderful day.